There's an Academy for Creative and Performing Arts at Leiden University, and that actually does represent, again, the Royal Academy and the Royal Conservatory in The Hague. So the media technology program is a collaboration, nevertheless, with The Hague, although I'm directly employed in Leiden at the Computer Science Institute. And as you also mentioned, I'm also involved in the art science interfaculty. That's also an interesting hybrid place because it's an interfaculty between both the Royal Academy and the Royal Conservatory in The Hague. So that's let's say it's a cake and it has three parts because I really see my own art practice also as something separate. That's sometimes different for other people who try to incorporate the art practice within their academic activities. For me, there are lots of overlaps somehow. I will try to show that a little bit. I will tell you a little bit more about media technology in general, because you can think about the Media Technology Master Program, as you see already, it's a Master of Science, which is important to realize because it's really within the Faculty of Sciences. It's not within humanities or something like that. And the way we sometimes explain the Media Technology Program and also the interest of the Media Technology Research Group is that we take the idea of an autonomous arts program and we translate that idea to science, which means that, and I know that the word autonomous art is something that doesn't really work well in an English or let's say outside of the Dutch context, but we speak about autonomous science. And what is autonomous science? Autonomous science means that you ask your own questions and you don't try to answer existing questions that are there within a particular research group. So it's really students or PhD students asking their own questions, coming up with their own topics. It's also freedom in thinking about how the method that you use, how to answer a particular question. And then the next freedom, and there's more, but let's say the third big freedom that there is thinking about how to communicate the results from the research. So what we actually are very interested in is, on the one hand, creating a free and open place within science, and on the other hand, of course, we are interested in experimenting and checking the boundaries of what science is. And that is what we are doing. How does that relate to me? This is how I started. And these are questions and topics that I was trying to address maybe already during high school or right after high school. I was thinking and so this is like 1988. I was thinking okay, why does a sound the way it sounds? And is it possible to compose a form of music primarily focusing on timbral and textural qualities of sound instead of music that is primarily melodic, harmonic, rhythmic, and how would that sound? And I was starting to use computers, in a sense, as a tool to research it. It's the moment that computers just started to become, let's say, home computers just started to become capable enough of starting to generate sound and process sound in real time. What did I do? I went to the Royal Conservatory in this particular case, and I started to study sonology. Sonology is an institute that exists for a long time, but it's the first moment that they started a full-time program, on the one hand about composition of electronic music, but on the other hand really about studying sound and all things around it. Another topic is, but okay, if we can do that with the computer, how do we interact with that? Because that something can happen in the computer doesn't mean that we as humans can relate to it. Yeah, sure, we can give some commands and we can maybe in some whatever text file create a score and let the computer perform that. But if we really want to relate ourselves to it, like we relate to other things in space, like objects, acoustical, like we do, for example, with acoustical music instruments, it's a different topic. So it is about interaction, it's also about interfaces. And, well, these things are, I think, at the end, the key topics for the work that I make. It's about space, it's about the body, it's about perception, and it's about interaction in space, interacting with the body. These are the key things. So it looks, on the one hand, there's a lot of technology involved. Yes, there is. But what am I at the end interested in? It is actually the body in space and interaction in space. So how do I do that? I have a constant focus on developing my own interfaces. I have a constant focus on developing hardware, well, let's say if needed, because sometimes there's hardware that can do what I want it to do, sometimes not at all. And on the other hand, it's about developing own software. So I hardly use any existing software. Going back in time very quickly, this is Paradiso 1994. Sensor band, you see Atao Tanaka, that is currently at Goldsmiths, and he's professor over there of what is called media computing, an interesting other term. You see Zbigniew Krakowski in the back, and you see me on the left. In this case, using the MIDI conductor that I got in touch with during my sonology study, and the MIDI conductor is derived from the hands of Michel Weisvis, the former STEM director. Boom. Another instrument. I'm happy I see it better on the beamer than on the screen. That's often the other way around. This is SoundNet, in this case 1996, in Créteil, a suburb of Paris. And I like speaking about this, but we'll do it very, very quickly. You see it basically, and this is the smaller version, and later we even expanded it. It's basically a network of ropes. We have the sensors in between the ropes, but it's also a musical instrument that you play together, but you don't play together like playing four hands on the piano, because there you play your own notes. But here, since we're all interconnected, it's more like playing the bow of the violin by one person while the other one is playing the fingers on the neck of the violin, and then you have to interact. So, and here you see a little bit, but this was during testing, DEF 96, I think, in Nighttown in Rotterdam. And here you see in the installation, it's called Spatial Sounds, 100 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour, and it's a collaboration with Marnix de Nijs that I'm still sharing my studio space with. The thing we were interested in is a very simple thing. It's basically how we as humans relate ourselves to a machine, and the question of control, so the control question of whether we control the machine or the machine controls you. And this is in a very physical direction. In a sense, you can ask that question even when you operate a computer. Are you controlling the computer, or is the computer controlling you? Well, I would say the computer is most of the time controlling you, and you're not controlling the computer, except that you're not aware of that. In this case, because it's a speaker on an arm that can technically indeed rotate 100 kilometers an hour, but that is a little bit too fast, completely not needed. So in the exhibition context, it can go up to 50 kilometers an hour. But it's very playful. You can really have a dialogue with it as audience. It swings around you, follows people. But when it gets too much input, it starts to freak out. When it freaks out, there's still a certain form of interaction, because that form of interaction is that the more people there are, the faster it goes, and the closer the people are to the installation, the faster it goes. Which means that, and it goes at a certain moment that fast that it's so scary that you just have to back off. And since you go backwards, the installation itself will slow down and will then go back to the more playful forms of interaction. So it's really very literal, controlling the audience and the audience playing and interacting with the piece itself. And we see, this is in Pittsburgh, people, and what is interesting about it is that, and I don't know if any of you in the room has seen the piece, but people want to interact with it over and over. And it's very strange because people really want to get control over the machine. And even when it freaks out completely, it's only like 10, 20 seconds later that people already start to adapt and again want to engage themselves with the installation. It's something that nor Marnix nor me really expected when we built it, but we were simply very fascinated by the idea. But now, maybe it's good to switch to LIACs. And so this is a work isn't made within the university context, but the university was at a certain moment, it was actually the computer science department, was organizing a conference about human-robot personal relationships. And I thought, funny topic. What is computer science doing with human-robot personal relationships? And it turns out that, for example, what they are doing is thinking about, they call it social robots. So it's not about art, social robots. Social robots that, for example, interact with elderly people, or social robots that can interact with autistic people. And often in science, and it was already mentioned a little bit earlier this afternoon, is that sometimes the applications that scientists are thinking about can be extremely funny. Sure, I mean, this might be something you can do, but I am personally not at all convinced that it makes so much sense. Yeah, maybe certain things can be done, but for me, there's an order problem as an artist. But yeah, in this case, there is no order problem. There's a conference on this topic, and I was thinking, but what the fuck? This installation, the rotating speaker, is a super good example of human-robot personal relationships. Why not just write a paper about it? And what is also interesting about it is that what I figured out, and so there I learned something from the conference, and I mean, of course, I really participated in the conference and had dialogue with people, so there I started to learn more and more about how they divide certain things. But something that I also claim in the paper is that it's, the installation is a very good form of what is called abstract robotics. And that's something that is not a field that isn't explored that much, because abstract robotics, I mean, robotics is mostly about humanoids, about copying human or having something that still has two eyes or still has ears or something that really is, a robot that copies what we think, well, things similar to a human. Actually, just like when we think about aliens, we also, sure, they're different, they have to look strange, but they still have to walk, they still need arms, they still need to see. So that surprised me. So I claimed and came to the conclusion that on the one hand, yes, it's very powerful in its interaction. So it's a very good example of interaction between humans and robots. Secondly, that it's a very good example of an abstract robot, so something that doesn't look like a human, but nevertheless evokes lots of interaction. But of course, we took the concept of and the words of HCI and just changed them into audience artwork interaction. But this is a big change because in the field of the human-computer interaction, they all the time think about a user. There is no audience, there is no whatever other word. A participant doesn't exist, no, it's always a user. And the user is interacting with the computer. And as long as you keep on thinking about the user interacting with the computer, it doesn't bring you to other ideas than that the user should control the computer. What is interesting about interaction is the dialogue that you can facilitate between the work and the audience. That's also, again, what happened in the installation. It's something that from thinking about the installation, thinking about interaction, started to make more and more sense to me. And basically, it's a new field that is presented and starting to find more ground. So the way it works is that every sound has GPS coordinates assigned to it. Yeah? So the application is running. Yeah? So there's a special application. The application is running. The application is getting the coordinates of the phone. Yeah? And at a certain moment you enter the region of the sound, so that sound will start playing.
Yeah, and it can play multiple sound files. So the mixing of the sound files is just playing within the device. Very easy to translate if you have the GPS coordinates to actually display it automatically in Google Maps. Lots of advantages. Already a bit during testing, I had to conclude that it is totally not immersive. That sure, it all works, it all technically works, but there is no new space. There's just sound files that play, sound files that mix. And these sound files can be super good, and then it works totally well, but it's not because this idea works well. It just works well because, for example, could be somebody telling you a story, look to the right and do this and whatever. There are lots of different approaches with great content in the sound files that work super well. But there is no spatial immersion, there's no new space that develops around you. Not like with Radioscape, where Radioscape with every centimeter and millimeter are part of the new space around you, and where the existing space actually interacts with the radio waves and it leads to a whole new thing. Here, you have to walk, and you walk, and then, yeah, sure, here I can hear that the new sound file starts, but I don't associate it with the space, because it's not that I can, on the small scale, have a relationship with that. So it does not bring something. So it can be, I mean, as I said, the result can be interesting, but the immersion or the embodiment is simply not taking place. And here I became aware of actually how difficult it is when you use simulation, because this is of course all simulation, it's software, computers never do things for real, computers just simulate things. So I've learned how difficult simulation is. The great thing here that is of course possible to add, in a sense, an infinite number of sound files depending on your storage space and stuff like that, but you can do a lot with the sound files. This was then originally happening on an iPhone 3, I think, and that was able to play like 6 or 7 sound files simultaneously, not a lot. But nowadays you could play like 30 sound files simultaneously, also no problem. And yeah, and you could have many more that are not playing, that are starting to play when you move. The GPS is relatively imprecise. That's the problem. Yeah. So in relation to our bodily scale, it's imprecise. If we would be 100 times bigger, all of a sudden GPS will be super precise. Yeah, but that's one of the aspects. And the other thing is that it drifts. So it's not, I don't know, there's no one spot in space. The measured coordinates for this space might change over time. So it's not as immediate. It's not that I always, when I go here, that there the sound starts, and here it stops, and there it starts, so it's not. So that also makes it random and makes us not, that leads to a situation where we don't start to imagine a new space. Yeah, if it would be consistent, it would be very, very different. A Radioscape is super consistent, and there are a lot of strange things happening, but the strange things are also totally consistent, and that makes it great. We are always used to stereo, but if you record sound here, there's 2 microphones at the entrance of your ears, you actually record how your head is filtering the sound depending on where it comes from. If you would play that back, you really can get the experience of sound being above you, behind you. And if you can do real-time filtering with these, you can measure this, and then you can do real-time filtering of sound with these measurements, and you could recreate it. But there's another thing, is that it will never ever be perfect. Yes, it is much more immediate because now I have movement and this is interesting. I'm still thinking about whether in this case I need to track head movement or not. So that is a choice, whether it is now it's again the question, is it going to be a handheld navigation device, so that the phone will be the handheld navigation device, or is it now going to do head tracking? But there's something else, is that it is definitely never ever going to be perfect. So for example, in my studio in Rotterdam, I can see the Euromast, and I can, for example, assign a sound to the Euromast. drifts. Not in this case because of GPS, it's simply because the compass is not precise. And actually, wherever you walk, and especially in cities, the magnetic field of the Earth is bent and curved and totally not perfect. Is that a problem? No, actually not. That could be a problem if we want to do, if we want to imitate reality with perfection. But it means that I have to think about things that I am not imitating reality. Radioscape was anyway completely not imitating reality. But I have to think about interesting forms, interesting behavior of sound. That yes, there is this aspect of navigation, but also sounds that don't have fixed positions. Why would they have to have fixed positions? Sounds that move, sounds that interact with me, sounds that interact maybe even with other people that are in the same environment. That would become interesting. And that would be effective. Imitating reality, never ever, because the reality is much more perfect than the reality that I can simulate in software. So the big lesson here is doing things in software. That means a lesson that I learned many times, but it's a lesson that I learn again. Doing things in software is not at all that easy. In software, nothing happens in parallel. That's something we should never not forget either. Yeah? In Radioscape, everything happens in parallel, everything is simultaneous. In software, a processor is always doing one thing, then another thing, then another thing, then another thing, and we have to add things to each other in a sequential way. There's never, ever, and you can try to find algorithms for it, but it's always also limited, real interaction between many different input parameters, you could say. I had a fundamental question. I was thinking, what happens in the acoustic space, does that more or less also happen, in a different way maybe, in the electromagnetic space? That was my initial question, and from there I went on. Theoretically, this would not have been something that scientists would have been able to help me with a lot, because they would say, yeah, we know about waves, and yeah, that would happen. But they don't know, so they would say, they would have probably told me yes, but they would not have been able to say anything about the experience. And I tried to contact radio amateurs to help me with this, because they partly use also the same frequency bands. I didn't find anybody that wanted to help me. And I still don't know 100% why, I only have a guess. But my guess is that I wanted to redesign everything, or to invent everything. So, fundamental questions. And I want to pose that to a term that I sometimes find difficult to understand, is innovation. Because I don't know, did I do any innovation here? Maybe not, I have no clue. And to be honest, it's not important for me. What is important for me is to have this idea, this question, and just work on it. Science can sometimes be the answer, sometimes not. And I'm currently doing a project, and it's something that I could maybe fully do myself. But the opportunity came up to collaborate with the music technology group of the Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona. And they are skillful guys. They are the ones, maybe you know it, they developed the Reactable. Well, it was actually collaboration with other people, but I think most of you know the Reactable. But they have something else. They do what is called feature extraction from sound. What does that mean? It means that you, for example, have a computer listening to 5 seconds of sound, and then going to tell you, that's this particular song or this particular composition. And they do stuff like that. And they are called the Music Technology Group. Maybe that already tells something. I'm still trying to figure out, are they doing research, fundamental research, or are they doing engineering? What is it? And that is another thing that's important to realize, that engineering is really something very different from doing fundamental research and being open to these questions. And I, for example, just got an email from them yesterday where I'm saying, I want to do it. I want to develop this with you. I have an idea to separate sounds in their individual overtones and be able to spatialize them on multiple speakers separately and get, in a sense, a different form of control over the individual components of the sound. And so every sound, almost every sound, is full of overtones. Think about it like this, that you have how is it called? The dandelion, the flower with the paardenbloem, but then in the... No, well, but the... Sorry? Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you have all these seeds there, and imagine that all these seeds are representing a separate overtone of sound. You hold it, you blow it, and they all go in space. That's what I want to do, but I want, there are certain questions of how to do it, what are we going to make possible, what not. And I got such a strange email yesterday saying, like, yeah, but, you know, you provided this, but don't you know that that is not possible? And I was thinking, like, something's very wrong here, because we have to think on the fundamental level, because it's not that I want to simply apply what they know, I want to involve them in the question so that they also think about that question. Because otherwise it's not interesting. Otherwise I could anyway do it myself. I don't need the engineers. I am interested in the dialogue between how they think on the fundamental level, on what could be done and how we could approach it, and how I do that. That is something that will be beneficial to me. The other things, well, they're a little bit boring. Okay, that's it.